Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the morning chapel, day one. Our opening words are a radio drama that Barnaby's going to help me with. It's an old science fiction text by Terry Bisson. They're made out of meat.
Meat?
Meat. They're made out of meat.
Meat.
You're not understanding, are you? You're refusing to deal with what I'm telling you. The brain does the thinking. The meat.
Thinking meat. You're asking me to believe in thinking meat.
Yes. Thinking meat. Conscious meat. Loving meat. Dreaming meat. The meat is the whole deal. Are you beginning to get the picture, or do I have to start all over?
Oh my God. You're serious about this. They're made out of meat.
Thank you. Finally. Yes, they are indeed made out of meat, and they've been trying to get in touch with us for almost 100 of their years.
Oh my God. So what does this meat have in mind?
First, it wants to talk to us. Then I imagine it wants to explore the universe, contact other sentiences, swap ideas and information, the usual.
We're supposed to talk to meat?
That's the idea. That's the message they're sending out by radio. Hello, anyone out there? Anybody home? That sort of thing.
They actually do talk then. They use words, ideas, concepts?
Oh yes, except they do it with meat.
I thought you just told me they use radio.
They do, but what you think is on the radio? Meat sounds. You know how when you slap a flat meat, it makes a noise? They talk by flapping their meat at each other. They can even sing by squirting air through their meat.
Oh my God, singing meat. This is altogether too much. So what do you advise?
Officially or unofficially?
Both.
Officially, we are required to contact, welcome, and log in any and all sentient races or multi-beings in this quadrant of the universe without prejudice, fear, or favor. Unofficially, I advise that we erase the records and forget the whole thing.
I was hoping you would say that.
It seems harsh, but there is a limit. Do we really want to make contact with meat?
I agree 100%. What's there to say? Hello, meat? How's it going? But will this work? How many planets are we dealing with here?
Just one. They can travel to other planets in special meat containers, but they can't live on them. And being meat, they can only travel through sea space, which limits them to the speed of light and makes the possibility, if they're ever making contact, pretty slim. Infinitesimal, in fact.
So we just pretend there's no one home in the universe.
That's it.
Cruel, but you said it yourself. Who wants to meet meat? And the ones who've been aboard our vessels, the ones that you probed, you're sure they won't remember?
They'll be considered crackpots if they do. We went into their heads and smoothed out their meat so that we're just a dream to them.
A dream to meat. How strangely appropriate that we should be meat's dream.
And we marked the entire sector unoccupied.
Good. Agreed, officially and unofficially. Case closed. Any others? Anyone interesting on that side of the galaxy?
Yes, a rather shy but sweet hydrogen core cluster intelligence and a class 9 star in G445 zone. Was in contact 2 galactic rotations ago. Wants to be friendly again.
They always come around.
And why not? Imagine how unutterably cold the universe would be if we were all alone. Okay, those of you who have, and I'm sorry they didn't print enough orders of service, but if those of you who have an order of service might be willing to share it with other people, because the song is in here. This is not a UU hymn, it's not in the UU hymnal, but it's sort of been adopted by a bunch of congregations unofficially. We sang this odd infinitum about 3 irises ago. You may remember it from that. a simple faith. Life is a short embrace. Heaven is in this place every day. Home's the ground we till, making stay one to live. Thankful for dreams fulfilled every day. There is no hell to fear, no judgment day drawing near. Trust that inner voice we hear every day. Life's not a goal or race, it's about heart and faith and living a life of grace every day. Just a simple faith. Life is a short embrace. Heaven is in this place every day. Hope's the ground we till, making shade one to live. Thankful for dreams fulfilled every day. Trust is an open hand, making an honest stand. Living here in the land every day. Living the mystery, seeking the harmony here between you and me every day. Ours is a simple faith. Life is a short embrace. Heaven is in this place every day. Hope's the ground we till, making stay one to live. Thankful for dreams fulfilled every day. Thank you. Let's do a reading from Mr. Emerson, number 531 in your gray hymnal. What page? 531. Let us learn the revelation of all nature and thought, that the highest dwells within us, that the sources of nature are in our own minds. As there is no stream or ceiling between our heads and the infinite heavens, so there is no bar or wall in the soul where we, the effect, cease, and God, the cause, begins. I am constrained every moment to acknowledge a higher origin for events than the will I call mine. There is a deep power in which we exist, and whose beatitude is accessible to us. Every moment when the individual feels invaded by it is memorable. It comes to the lowly and simple. It comes to whosoever will put off what is foreign and proud. It comes as insight. It comes as serenity and grandeur. The soul's health consists in the fullness of its reception. Forever and ever, the influx of this better and more universal self is new and unsearchable. Within us is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty, to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. When it breaks through our intellect, it is genius. When it breathes through our will, it is virtue. When it flows through our affections, it is love. All right. Now while you've got your hymnals in your hand, you might want to turn to 123, one of the most popular of the hymns in the hymnal for UUs, and I'm going to do a prayer which takes off on the words of this, and when I start singing, try to resist the effort to start singing with me, because once I finish the prayer and say amen, then we can all sing it all the way through. give me a note. Spirit of life, Father, Mother, God, ground of our being, fount of every blessing, ancient of days, weaver of our lives' design, day spring from on high, El Shaddai, Adonai, by whatever name or names we choose to call you, knowing they are only our attempts to name the unnameable. Come unto me, indwell here within each of us, not in some hereafter and not in some heaven above, but here on Star Island on June 24th. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Let us loose ourselves to resonate with the divine harmony of the spheres, a music so vast that we hear it only in fragments, but which has been sounding since the beginning of time. The music of the force which through the green fuse drives the flower, the force which is the most powerful in the universe, the force of love. Blow in the wind, the clean breeze which sweeps our minds of the cravings and clingings which imprison us. Rise in the sea, the salt blood which covers the earth and courses through our veins and reminds us we are each incarnated spirit. Move in the hand, these hands that are your hands, the hands through which all of your work in this world gets done, giving life the shape of justice, the justice which has been the cry of oppressed peoples since the beginning of human history. Roots, hold me close. Let us never forget where we have come from. In the chaos and uncertainty of life, let us always be able to touch our familiar groundings. Wings set me free. Let us grow and blossom in unexpected and unpredictable ways as the Spirit leads us without fetter or tether. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. Amen. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Some questions you might ask. Is the soul solid, like iron? Or is it tender and breakable, like the wings of the moth in the beak of an owl? Who has it and who doesn't? I keep looking round me. The face of the moose is as sad as the face of Jesus. The swan opens her white wings slowly. In the fall, the black bear carries leaves into the darkness. One question leads to another. Does it have a shape, like an iceberg, like the eye of a hummingbird? Does it have one lung, like the snake and the scallop? Why should I have it, and not the anteater who loves her children? Why should I have it, and not the camel? Come to think of it, what about the maple leaves? What about the blue iris? What about the little stones sitting alone in the moonlight? What about the roses and lemons and their shining leaves? What about the grass?
Thank you, Pat. Begotten, not made. We're here this week on STAR to ponder artificial intelligence because, as Saul Katz pointed out last night, 2018 is the 50th anniversary of Stanley Kubrick's great film, 2001: A Space Odyssey, which stars a computer named Hal, who is able to think for himself and ultimately kills almost all the humans for whom he is supposed to be caring. Hal is not the first dangerous thinking machine in fiction, nor is he the last. But the field of so-called artificial intelligence, AI, is booming today, and we have made great strides in creating computer algorithms which can talk to us, can decipher our speech and translate it from one human language to another, which can recognize faces and make some sense of a visual field, can diagnose diseases, and which may soon be driving our cars. Now, when I use that word algorithm, I mean simply a procedure. Computers work by codes, detailed sets of instructions. If this is the case, do that, otherwise do something else. If you were to print out the operating system of your computer or any computer-like device, you would have a long string of ones and zeros, which would make no sense to you at all, but would make perfect sense to the computer. The nearest analogy to a computer operating system in our own bodies is our DNA, but you know that your genetic inheritance is only a small part of what makes you, you. AI is an apt topic for IRAS, for artificial intelligence is right at the crux, the intersection of religion and science. But here we must make a distinction. The questions presented by AI for particular applications, like driving a car, speech recognition, facial recognition, are quite different from the attempt to create an artificial autonomous agent with something like consciousness. This latter effort is often called AGI, artificial general intelligence. I'll get back to the more particular applications in later talks. Today I want to focus on the effort to create a complete artificial mind or soul. What would it mean to have a machine which was conscious? Would such a machine be able to see deeper into reality than human minds could? Would it be wiser? Would such a mind be subject to human shortcomings, such as rage, cruelty, indifference, depression, racism? Or would it be magically free from such flaws? Would we be committing murder if we turned off the computer which generated that mind, as the actor did in 2001? One way to ask the questions is whether machines can have souls. Many of you will say that's not a helpful way to frame it, because that question only has meaning if we know what a soul is. And souls are notoriously hard to define. The whole effort to define words, to parse them so that we can know precisely what we're talking about, comes up short when we come to the word soul. all of our Zen wisdom, all the existentialist and paradox-loving and transcendentalist instincts, not to mention all the popular songs of the last 50 years, arise to say, hey, if you got to define it, you don't understand it. Soul is just something you have. But of course, that attitude makes the word almost useless for a searching scientific or philosophical inquiry. Some people, on the other hand, would say that soul is the most basic thing there is. Emerson, for example, in the reading we did earlier, the soul exists beyond cause and effect. Quote, as there is no screen or ceiling between our heads and the infinite heavens, so there is no bar or wall in the soul where we, the effect, cease and God, the cause, begins. The individual soul is a manifestation of God, and God is the oversoul, the soul of all souls. Yet in the religion and science dialogue, the word soul is so resistant to analysis that it might be said to hinder rather than help understanding. And yet it has a long tradition in religion. When I announced several months ago on Facebook that I was preaching on the topic, can machines have souls? One of my retired UU minister colleagues commented, no, 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 no. From the religious side, there is a strong argument that nothing created by humans can have the special human quality that we call soul, whatever it may be. Let me sketch some of the religious ideas that support this argument and start in the realm of myth. In the Garden of Eden story, in Genesis, God forms the first man, Adam, out of the clay and then breathes into him the breath of life. The clay is a non-living substance, but it is God who imbues it with life by his breath. This is similar to Greek mythology, where the Titan Prometheus creates humans out of clay and blows the breath of life into them. That much seems to have been okay in Greek myth, but then Prometheus thinks the humans that he's created ought to be able to cook and keep warm, so he steals the element of fire from the gods and gives it to humans. Zeus gets angry at this and sentences to Prometheus to be chained to a rock where ravens attack him and devour his liver every day. Fortunately, the liver regenerates, so he doesn't die. In both the Greek and Jewish perspectives, you don't want humans to get divine attributes. In Genesis, there's the story of the Tower of Babel, where humans were going to reach to the heavens, so God created different languages for them to speak, so they couldn't understand one another and couldn't coordinate the construction. It's not good for humans to aspire to be God. Fast forward to the 4th century Council of Nicaea, when Christianity had been adopted as the religion of the Roman Empire, and Constantine called all the bishops together to determine what Christianity was. Theologians of the time were pretty sure that God the Father had existed from all time, but they weren't too sure about the second person of the Trinity, the Logos, which had been incarnated in Jesus of Nazareth during his life on earth. Had the Logos, the second person of the Godhead, existed from all time, or was it created by God the Father at or before the time he created the universe, the rest of the universe? The question divided the Arians, who said that the Logos came later, from the Athanasians, who said the Logos was co-eternal with God the Father. At the council, as you may know, the Athanasians won out and produced the Nicene Creed, which is still said in most Orthodox Christian churches. One version of that creed says that Jesus was, quote, begotten of his Father before all worlds. Another that he was begotten, not made. What does that mean? In the old biblical terminology, begetting is what a male does to produce a child, while the female bears the child, the male begets. To make something, on the other hand, is to form material into a shape, and the thing that a human makes will be non-living. Even a sculptor who forms clay into a human form will have only created a likeness. To make a human, from the male point of view, you beget, you father. The Nicene Council insisted that the Logos proceeded from God the Father as a child, as the product of his father, not as a sculpture is the product of the sculptor's art. This Judeo-Christian idea that a human can't make a soul is carried into stories like Pygmalion, the sculptor who falls in love with his statue, Pinocchio, the woodcarver who wishes his puppet into life, and the sorcerer's apprentice, where the lazy assistant animates a broom to do his task for him and then doesn't know how to stop it. All of these have unhappy endings. And the moral they teach is that trying to treat a made thing as alive is bound to result in disaster. In Jewish lore, there is a creature called the golem, which was fashioned from dust or clay, but animated using religious rituals and made to perform various tasks. In most versions, the golem could not speak. Usually somebody got hurt dealing with the golem. Terry will enlighten us on golems in a few days. In the 19th century, Mary Shelley published her novel Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. This was both one of the first horror novels and one of the first works of science fiction. We often call the creature Frankenstein, but properly, Frankenstein was the name of the human who created the monster. This creature not only could speak and read, but reason. It had the ability to murder people and to entertain motives such as revenge and rage. It was designed to be scary, and it was. What I'm suggesting here is that the Judeo-Christian religious tradition and a strain of lore all concur that beings made by humans, as opposed to those begotten by humans, were not supposed to be animated or have souls. At the same time, the Industrial Revolution was producing more and more machines to take the places of humans in agriculture, industry, and the home. In the 20th century, machines were applied to thinking tasks as well as manual labor. The word robot, as probably a lot of you know, was invented by a Czech playwright, Karel Čapek, in his 1921 play, R.U.R. The initials of the title stand for Rossum's Universal Robots, which was the name of the company featured in the play. By the way, the word robot comes from a Slavic word, which basically means slave. The company featured in the play is a factory, which is making a lot of money manufacturing workers for a large variety of enterprises around the world. These creatures are not comprised of metal or silicon, but of flesh and blood, yet they are made in a factory rather than born in the natural way. A plant assembles them, just like a Ford assembly line. Though they look about like humans and can talk and interact, they are treated by the management as things. When one of them breaks, it is simply sent back onto the factory floor to be disassembled and its part used in other robots. The conflict in the play is set in motion when a liberal reformer, probably a UU, arrives insisting that these robots must be accorded human rights. As the plot develops, the company management decides to make the robots more human-like by giving them the capacity to feel pain. This pushes them into a new kind of consciousness, and eventually they revolt and start killing the humans. So RUR, the drama which introduces the concept and word robot, also introduces the dread of the robot takeover, the robot revolt. Okay, that's a thumbnail sketch of the religious side of the question. How about the scientific? I'm just getting into the reading on this subject, but I know that developments of the last 20 years in neuroscience raised profound questions about how what we call consciousness arises in the brain, how our brain generates our minds. That little introduction we gave you this morning might set your thinking a little bit. We know a lot more than we used to about how the brain works, but we still don't know how it generates consciousness. The Enlightenment in the 18th century gave us many great things. Modern science originated there. But it also overemphasized reason as opposed to emotion. The ordinary consciousness and intelligence that we know of is embodied intelligence. And it is tied into human emotions at a basic level. Thus, Descartes was wrong to say, I think, therefore I am. It would be more accurate to say, I feel, therefore I am. As you sit here right now, the feeling of being you is not just your thoughts. You may be thinking. You may even be thinking in complete sentences. But you also may be turning over several streams of thought at once, listening to me drone on, wondering what you're going to have for lunch, replaying the argument you had with your significant other last night, or with your mother 3 decades ago. There may be a soup of words floating around in your mind. And part of the mix might be an itch on your right ankle, a queasiness in your gut, an ache in your back. All of that is part of what it is like to be you at this very moment in time. And it's a set of things that you obviously can't program in advance into a computer. And why would you want to? What we call artificial intelligence is not a program per se. It is a means of teaching a computer to program itself, the way the brain does. Our brains evolved by a kind of neural Darwinism. There are 1 billion connections in our brain, and they can fire in circuits. When we're babies, the circuits are firing at random, but soon it becomes clear that some circuits get us what we want and others don't. So the circuits that win for us get reinforced, and the circuits that lose get discarded. So we can teach machines to program themselves the same way. This is what is called deep learning. How will we know if we have succeeded? Some of you may be familiar with the name Alan Turing. Turing was a brilliant British computer scientist who helped the Allies crack the German Enigma codes in the Second World War. In 1953, he proposed a test for artificial intelligence. Can a machine fool you into thinking you're dealing with another human? If so, we've achieved artificial intelligence. Can deep learning produce, an interesting, I will talk about the Turing test more tomorrow, but an interesting twist on the Turing test was posed by the 2013 movie Her. By now, we are used to computers, phones, and other devices that incorporate a person-like program to interact with the user. If I want to find a piece of music on my iPhone, I just press the big button at the bottom and say, Siri, play something by Ella Fitzgerald. That saves me having to scroll through a bunch of menus to get what I want. Many of us have these home speakers, which respond to the name Alexa. Well, the movie Her takes this one step further. It is set in the now or not too distant future and involves a guy named Theodore who makes his living ghostwriting love letters for other people, interestingly enough, but whose marriage has come apart and he has a hard time sustaining real love with anyone. He gets a new computer which comes with an operating system, the basic program that operates the computer, but this operating system has artificial intelligence. So as soon as he turns it on and chooses a female voice for it, the operating system names herself Samantha and riffles through the data stored on Theodore's computer to learn all about him in seconds. Then Samantha starts interacting with Theodore in a very personal way, teasing, cajoling, pouting. This is not computer as servant, assistant. This is computer as best friend turning into lover. Of course, it turns out badly. Poor Theodore, madly in love, is crushed when he finally comes to realize that Samantha is on intimate terms not only with him, but with 500 other users at the same time. He has always known she's not human, but this drives home the point that she isn't exclusively his. That's Her, the movie. Some clever and imaginative Hollywood writing. I found it stretched my credulity that anyone could fall in love with a being without a body. But I think it teaches something very valuable about what it is to be human. To be human is to be embodied. Our minds are carried by our brains, which are wired into every other part of our bodies. In the movie, Samantha yearns for a body, but without one. A romance with an embodied human is really not sustainable. I don't know what a soul would be like without a body. So I don't know whether a soul can be immortal. By the same token, I have a hard time imagining God as a being with an intelligence and a will, but without a body. We're programmed by our instincts to see and recognize faces even when there are no faces. We see faces in clouds, in trees, and rocks. We can make faces out of clay. We recognize signs of personhood in inanimate objects because our brains have evolved social instincts. We project personhood onto the world and call it God. Emerson thought, as I said earlier, that God was the oversoul, that God consisted of the sum of all souls. Well, that oversoul at this point definitely has digital components. We are interacting on any kind of digital media by the algorithms which govern that media. I'm a user of Facebook, which has just changed its basic algorithms twice in the last 2 weeks. And I see that I'm getting a significantly different slice of reality in my feed. This will have ripple effects, even on those of us who do not use a particular corner of social media. What is the bottom line here? I don't think we've reached the point where digital devices or their algorithms are going to substitute for real people in a deep way. While we may find our personal digital assistants useful in finding a pizza parlor, the next song we want, or keeping our calendar, we're not likely to ask them out for dinner and a movie, or confide our deepest hopes and fears to them. We may fold them into our entertainment strategy, but it would be a big mistake to look to them for emotional or spiritual sustenance. They are not your new best friends, but they will play an ever-increasing role in our connections with other flesh and blood people. More tomorrow. Amen. Let's finish up with number 138. The blessing of truth be upon us, the power of love direct us and sustain us, and may the peace of this community preserve our going out and our coming in from this time forth until we meet again. Blessed be. Amen. Thanks to Pat. Thanks to Barnaby for helping with the service this morning.